Yo, it's Jacob here. Today, I just kind of want to go over what steps I took to help someone I know keep their job due to a funny situation involving a positive test for THC in a legal state. Obviously, this applies to Minnesota. Here are the statutes in front of you. 181.951. Different legal states will have different languages and wording that is used. Obviously, familiarize yourself or consult with an attorney. I am not an attorney. I'm just a man who knows how to read a statute. This is not legal advice, but this is just what I did myself. Someone I know got a job at Home Depot and started working there for 3 days. On the third day during lunch, they got a note saying they would be fired due to a dirty test. And the ensuing story was just crazy. Home Depot did not do their due diligence. We spent weeks trying to get the job back, eventually resorting to calling corporate HR and quoting the statutes to them in order to get that job back. Normally, I wouldn't put this much of work and time into something so goofy, but we knew we had a funny situation here because they had already started working there, and then the pre-employment test came back, and then they fired them. So since they were already in the system as an employee, that might usually mean that they'd owe you back pay for all the missed pay due to the employer, in our opinion here, violating state law. So the actual HR lady did not give this person substantial advice. There are other statutes that state the types of steps an employer is supposed to take. In Minnesota, after a dirty test, those were not followed. And then the other thing is these billion-dollar corporations kind of have a different company and corporation or a different subsidy to handle different things. Like Home Depot has their own HR corporation that they own, that they work with in tandem with the actual Home Depot company, from what I've understood through this case, through this matter. So the HR lady did not advise appropriately. The store's assistant manager instead told this person to contact First Advantage, which is the company that is in charge of this test. We contacted First Advantage. They got back to the employee and said that they failed for THC, and then walked through a correction process, as they call it, to figure out whether or not they failed. You know, are you a medical patient for THC? Or is it legal in your state? Did you just have it in your system for months before? It's illegal in our state. So they corrected it as a passed test and said they'd get those new results to the employer. Weeks went by, and the employer, for some magical reason, this store location did not have those results back. We repeatedly contacted First Advantage. They repeatedly said they gave the results to them. We ended up contacting this store's, not HR, not assistant, but the actual store manager, and we recorded him stating that they choose to follow federal law, but not state law. We gotta follow both. Our state laws have pretty clear-cut language so that one should know how to interpret it in conjunction with federal law, so that there's not too much confusion with what jurisdiction to go through. And with that being said, it was kind of entertaining watching this man, who is not a lawyer, assert that he knew what he was doing. And, well, we ended up just going through the statutes excuse me, with their corporate HR. And as you can see here, And big one is subdivision 7. Employers do not have a legal duty to request or require an employee or job applicant to undergo testing, which I find funny. But then the big ones for us are subdivision 8, limitations on THC testing, cannabis. I don't want to get the video flagged. Subdivision 9, testing exceptions. Subdivision 8, section A. Employer must not request or require the applicant to undergo testing solely for the purpose of determining the presence or absence as a condition of employment, unless otherwise required by state or federal law, which means you'd be doing a job that, might be like a peace officer, a firefighter, safety sensitive. Maybe you have an enhanced driver's license. You operate heavy machinery like a forklift or a semi. All of those will have federal level testing that the applicant employee has to go through, so that makes sense. Working the garden section at a Home Depot or running the cash register doesn't fall under that. So section B, unless otherwise required by state or federal law, employer must not refuse to hire a job applicant solely because the job applicant submits to this test. So, and then the test results indicate the presence of the substance. And then an employer must not request or require an employee to undergo testing on an arbitrary or capricious basis. Subsection D, paragraph D, comply with the safeguards for testing employees provided in sections 181953, 181954. I'll open these up. You can pause the video and read these if you want. I'm not going to go through this too much. Here's 181954. So our main point here was subdivision 8. And then subdivision 9 lists the exceptions. So like I said, these are positions that are pretty clear, pretty obvious of where the feds would have some sort of say in the matter. So yeah, anyways, HR ended up reading these statutes themselves and the paraphrased version on the Office of Cannabis Management's website for our state and siding with them. HR for corporate Home Depot even, agreed that that shouldn't have happened. So the next day, the store manager called back, offered the job back, and 3 weeks of back pay. Yes, sir. So yeah, once again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not advice. These are the steps I went through. From my personal experience, the law in America likes to see would-be victim take gradual steps of progression and escalation. The first thing we did was contact HR, the assistant store manager, the store manager. We gave them some time to correct themselves, to learn about the situation, to learn about remedial matters we could go through, like contacting the testing company, working through the corrections process with the testing company, and then having the testing company update the employer with the new correction and results. We then waited again for this employer and testing company to corroborate each other's stories and the results. Once they failed to do that, we once again called the HR assistant and store managers to just give them another opportunity to do the right thing here. And then we went to the HR. We built a case involving the statutes with dates for everything, recordings, and just other documentation that was necessary. HR was an absolute shit show to get through. It is very confusing when you're working with billion-dollar corporate entities that really have no face. At some point, a company seems to get too big, and the number one thing that always suffers right away seems to be customer support. So stick to it. If you're getting looped through different phone systems, and different corporations are bouncing you back and forth over the phone, someone hangs up on you, someone doesn't know, stick to it, call back, assert yourself, stand up for yourself, because we ended up getting through to an HR person that held us on the phone for over 2 hours, but ended up being the reason we got things to settle in our favor before I would have had this friend of mine go and retain an actual attorney and sue. So, it saved this friend a lot of money in potential legal fees, and I would hope to say it saved this corporation potentially the same thing from having to deal with the court and deal with an unhappy employee and potentially having some sort of judgment cast against them. So yeah, hopefully this helps someone. Obviously things are different in every state. Obviously, unless you are familiar with how your legal system works in your state, hire an attorney that can give you some actual professional advice. But I'm blessed to live in Minnesota, and our state has made it pretty easy for the average citizen to represent themselves pro se by themselves and research these statutes online. It's super painless and easy if you have some basic reading comprehension skills and can go to the HR and say, look, this law says this right here. It's pretty clear cut. Can you help me? And chances are, if it's that black and white, they're going to do their best to remedy the situation. Unless you're really dealing with something pretty egregious, in which case, probably get a lawyer at that point. Consult with someone. A lot of law firms and offices, and they all offer some form of free consultation if they're really out to help people. Sometimes they're too busy and they can't do that though. So, yeah. But just know, call around. And don't forget, if you really are a victim of something, don't forget to believe in yourself, assert yourself, educate yourself. Corporations really don't have any incentive to want to follow the law and be nice to people. And I think my opinion of that matter is that because corporations think they're too big to fail, a lot are, and I would assume the majority of people aren't going to care. A lot of people have said, why spend all this time and effort on this? Well, you don't have to. No one's forcing you to. But like I said, the opportunity in this case was to hopefully establish potential case law because, legalization is pretty new for us, as of 2023. And that could help other victims in this situation stand up for themselves. And then the other thing is this person was hired and working there. So the second they were, in our opinion, wrongfully fired, that usually calls for back pay. And who doesn't want to get paid for essentially not working? They're owed that. They were a victim. And obviously the corporation in this matter took it upon themselves to make that payment and own that wrongdoing. So thank you, Home Depot. It is good to know that there are corporations that are the size of Walmart that do try to enforce some semblance of the law as the law is written onto their stores and onto their smaller managers from a corporate level. That's admirable to say the least, but who knows? There's always something more to the story. Maybe there's something more that I don't know that'll come out later on. But in this instance, things all seem to work out. So hopefully this helps someone. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not really going to be able to help too many other people if they have questions. But like I said, you just got to hope your state is pretty progressive and up to date with having their statutes and laws in an easily accessible area. If not, call your legislators and ask them to do that because, this is the difference between a really bad day for someone. Imagine if this person I knew was already disadvantaged, maybe was one check away from missing a rental payment, going hungry for a week, missing a car payment. Now their car might be repoed. Now they might be getting evicted. We had the privilege to take a stance and do something about this. And outside of the personal motives, the other motives are truly dissuading these managers from doing this to someone else. Hopefully that makes sense. I had the time of day to help someone, And hopefully that paves a smoother path for the next people so that they don't have their rights walked over. I think that's really important. You know, we're a collective, us citizens, versus the government, versus the corporations. And the corporations and the government also have to balance their power with each other. And usually the one that loses, no matter what, are the citizens, you and I. So, yeah. If you can do something to help someone behind you, always try. You know what they say, the world will know peace when men plant trees whose shade they will never experience. I know I butchered that. The gist still stands. Thanks for watching. Peace.